Alejandra, of course, we remember Columbine, and now we have Parkland and Santa Fe. Why do you think students now are taking action? Why are they leading? Why is their voice being heard?
Well, I think now it's more prevalent because of social media. It allows peers to connect online, and ultimately that culminates a sense of ownership in the sense that if they see something, they act immediately. They create a specific hashtag associated with the event, and then their peer-to-peers immediately in real time get that information. So it's sometimes fear that really spans that and allows them to connect, but also sometimes it's an opportunity as well for them to really allow themselves to speak out. It's their outlet.
Yeah, and I also feel that, and now with social media being so popular and with people really turning to it to express their voice, I almost feel like generations, especially the younger ones, feel as if this is their only way to be heard because they've attempted in other ways to make noise. But I think with the massive, social media activity and with the hashtag, their movement is hashtag never again. That already implies that it's a modern type of movement. It's a modern type of form of activism. And these kids are making it clear that it's not time for prayers anymore. These prayers have to be matched with actions. Right. So I think they're going off with collective sense of fear. They're also saying, you know what, enough is enough. We don't want your prayers. We don't want your sympathy or your pity. We want action. And we as children, as people who can't vote, know that there's something to be done, but we can't do it. So we're relying on the older generations to really go out for us and push that voice further with action.
Yeah. Well, speaking of action, though, wouldn't you say that these same students who are actually doing the killing are posting it on Facebook because they want that kind of action? They want that kind of fear. So are we to glorify the fact that they're using social media?
I think it puts the social media companies and organizations in a strange outlet, and it also puts a lot of pressure on parents and friends and peers to all step forward, and if they see something, they need to say something. Like the grandmother who turned in her own grandson because she saw warning signs on his computer, and it turned out he was, could have potentially harmed a lot of people. And there's steps like that need to be taken into account that just aren't right now. And I think people are too scared to step on someone's toes, like a false accusation of sorts. But there are warning signs, and apparently they're pretty clear looking at the past shooters and the demographic that they are.
And the fact that the Parkland students are able to make a manifesto and a list of things that we need to change, and the things that it's an endless list, and we keep adding to it and keep adding to it. It makes you wonder why these things are only coming to light now. Yes, we might have focused on it a little bit in the past, but the fact that the fear is just so rampant right now, and there's so many things escalating, it's heartbreaking for us to come to school and have to wonder, do I have to be worried about getting a notification? Is there something that's going to happen on campus? And that fear is something that it's becoming a culture, and that's that culture that we need to change.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you mentioned the manifesto, because as I was looking through it, these students from Parkland not only draw attention to the changes they wish to see in legislation for gun ownership and backgrounds, but they also draw attention to mental health and mental illnesses here in our nation. Like, are we addressing it properly? Or are we just categorizing everybody as crazy or as demented? And with that also comes, I just recently read an article on Facebook that was circulating about the Santa Fe shooter, that because he is underage, he can't be tried with the capital punishment because of a Supreme Court decision in which juveniles cannot be held on life without parole. But then, and they're saying that it's because his cognitive development, is going to be affected, and that it's a cruel and unusual punishment. But yet this kid was a straight A student. He was a football player, and we probably glorified him as a straight A student, honor roll student. But then, do we pay attention to the mental health issues that he was probably undergoing? Because nobody in a normal state of mind wakes up and says, hey, I want to go kill 10 of my classmates and teachers or whoever gets in the way. So I think that's an interesting part of this manifesto, that it's not just about gun violence, it's also about mental health and the mental health state in our nation.
But we're assuming that that was one of the reasons why he may have gone allegedly into the school and started shooting. Perhaps he had mental health. So then the question arises, should we then fund for more counselors in schools to look for students who are having trouble? What do you think actually causes some of these stress out students to become possibly violent?
There's a huge pressure on younger students these days, just, you know, because they're expected to excel. Parents expect them to get straight A's. They're just expected to do better. And it's really hard to have all this pressure on you and then all of a sudden you mess up, you know? Like, what if he had gotten an F on a paper and he didn't know how to tell his parents, and it just builds up, it builds up. There's so much, like, the college application process. You have to apply to all the Ivy Leagues. Like, if you don't get into an Ivy League, like, there's a stigma behind all of the college applications, the internships, everything you need to do in order to get where you want to be. And I think there's not enough focus on, you know, just being mentally happy and stabilizing a healthy lifestyle, like, to combat all that stress.
But whose responsibility is it, though? Is it the school's responsibility to look for those signs? Is it a parent's responsibility or a guardian? I mean, whose responsibility do you feel?
I mean, I think at the end, you bring up a good point, but I think really at the end of the day, stress is really just an excuse. We really need to dive a bit more deep and really look at it in two facets. It's really social media networks, Facebook, Twitter, have to own up responsibilities where the parents can't if they're not tech savvy. Parents at home can moderate, you know, search their homes, their phones, and so forth. But when it comes to social media, we need Facebook, Twitter, Instagram to take up a bigger role, hire the necessary personnel, and really start doing research in this area. And why not have the NRA fund it? I mean, if they're a huge proponent that guns should, they're protecting the Second Amendment and so forth, so prepare us some dollars for some type of research to help aid it and see really if it's stigmatized around mental health and what other contributing factors.
Alejandro, do you think that the companies would need to, like, establish, like, a protocol where they filter through posts, or certain keywords, like, maybe are flagged?
Yes, there are actually certain algorithms that Facebook can employ to trigger certain profiles to be sent to someone who can, like a content curator, who can look them, flag them, and then maybe they have some sort of psychologist on site that can ultimately review it and then come to a conclusion if this is something that should be taken to the local authorities.
But then are we impeding, though, on the First Amendment? I mean, technically, we do use social media as a way of communicating out our thoughts or opinions. So by doing that, are we now impeding on the First Amendment? And then with that, you know, we could talk about then the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. You know, should we be curbing gun control, or should we be upholding the Second Amendment and just somehow narrowing the age limit for guns and when to purchase them?
Well, I mean, social media companies should have a responsibility and an overall, like, peaceful social harmony, because ideally these companies establish these networks for us to connect, for us to, you know, and then to your point about, like, the student pressures and all of that, like, I mean, as a first generation student, I hold the pressure of making sure that my dreams don't fail, because if mine fail, then my family's dreams fail, right? And so, like, I felt pressured, but I never woke up with the notion to want to go kill someone out of pressure, right? So I think it's also an excuse for a lot of these kids, like you mentioned. I mean, we can categorize them as loners, as people who are suffering, but in reality, I think there's more in their nature to want to go out and seek these, like, violent,
it just seems like it's like
outlets.
a ticking time bomb where it starts with maybe the mental illness is the starting point, and then it progresses and progresses, and all of the outlying factors.
Well, then they also have the accessibility to these weapons, though. Because
Right.
the age is, why can I buy alcohol at a certain age, but then I can also buy a handgun? There's these age restrictions, and they need to be, in my opinion, they need to be higher, a lot higher.
And more extensive. I mean, the
Exactly.
background checks
The
need to go
background-
further than
Yes.
the bare minimum. you
So
know?
we seem to, there just needs to be a revision of the Second Amendment, not, you know, taking it
So
out, just
as we're just
revision.
wrapping this all up, then the question is, are these movements created by these students really making a difference?
I mean, they're getting the voice out, which I think once you have awareness of it and it's starting to circulate and it's getting more notion, I think you've done the first step. Whether whether the
difference
momentum
between
keeps going.
these students and in the past is they have a call to action, and where in the past it was pray for, you know, Las Vegas.
Yeah,
pray
but the
for Sandy
idea then
Hook.
is, yes,
But-
there's that call to action, but what is going to be the next step? Because
Yeah.
all I'm really seeing is all of these protests, but nobody's really taking action to take it to the next level.
And that's why we have elections coming up. So,
Right.
Yes, exactly.
well, thank you very much.
Thank you.